Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville, and I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations to give landowners valuable information that you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. And of course, at the Clark Law Firm, my focus is solely on landowner and oil and gas right owner representation. I have and continue to represent landowners for gas lease negotiations, hundreds of gas lease negotiations in the past, and continue to represent landowners for lease negotiations all across the state, review of leases, doing pipeline and right-of-way agreements. I'm going to talk about that some today. Royalty and royalty deduction issues, unitization and pooling issues, of course, estate planning. I'm going to do some more shows in the next few weeks too about estate planning because I'm really doing a lot more estate planning. I know I keep saying that, but really we are. And it's something I see a lot too with the future of a lot of my clients who I've represented for gas leases, pipeline agreements, well site agreements, and now maybe they're transitioning or getting ready to transition into royalty until the time they're going to receive royalties. And then other people who are starting to receive royalties who say, well, yeah, maybe this might happen, but I don't know for sure. Now they're starting to see, hey, finally something is occurring, and I want to make sure that I'm getting my affairs in order, that I have everything in line to take care of my children, my grandchildren, whatever charities perhaps. But we're going to do some more shows on that. But remember, you should be thinking about that. And I'll just touch on this and say that estate planning and estate plan should be and needs to be done for the individual, for you as an individual. And what I mean by that is you can't just simply, or the lawyer can't take off the shelf a will, a trust plan, a business entity development plan, and just say, okay, let's plug in this landowner's plug in their name. This will work for everybody. No, everybody comes from a unique circumstance. You have assets, you have debts, you have people in different ages, number of children, you have the type of property that you may own, the type of royalties that you're receiving. There are so many different variables that all come into play when developing the right plan for a specific individual. And that's a concern that I see. I think that too many people the lawyers, or they go online even and take this cookie cutter estate plan, and you can't do that. You need a plan for you as the individual. Very important. Okay, and of course, you got to go check out pagasleaseattorney.com. I'm going to keep on directing people there as I have for the last, I think now 4.5 years. I've been doing a radio show since August of 2010, and really encourage you to go check out pagasleaseattorney.com, pagasleaseattorney.com. If you haven't checked it out recently, but you've seen it before, or if you've never seen it, go to pagasleaseattorney.com. Have done a lot of renovations, and I'm loving the site. It's all new, renovated. I'm going to be putting up a new blog again. I think I'll have one up this week. Check it out. A lot of great information, whether you need representation or not. Check out the website, and also go to pipelineattorney.com. Check that out as well, pipelineattorney.com. I am working on it. Been very busy, and thankfully, very fortunate. I always say if I'm not on vacation, I'm working. So been very, very busy recently, doing a lot of different agreements, top leases, right-of-way agreements, estate planning, well site agreements, all these different items for landowners here in Pennsylvania. Now, I'm going to be switching gears here. I always come in, I have a plan, I have some items jot down, I may have some contracts that I want to talk about, but I'll tell you this. Today, I literally have one... actually, I can't even say that. I have the back side of a legal pad. I've used this whole legal pad up, and there's no paper left, but there's that kind of cardboard material on the back, and that's where I have my notes for today's show. Because today, what happened was I've been struggling recently with my coffee. I've been having a hard time. Haven't been able to, I don't know if I'm tired of the coffee, the brand, or whatever that I've been drinking, but I'm having a hard time getting a good cup of coffee. And thankfully, this morning, for some reason, the coffee was just delicious. So I've had me a few cups, so I'm kind of fired up. At the same time, hey, look, I know we're on here from 8 to 9 a.m. and hope people may be having their coffee and it's tasting half as good at least as mine, or maybe even I hope it's tasting 5 times better, but I'm kind of fired up. So as I was making my notes and I have my kind of list during the week that I create, I said, you know what, I'm going to put that to the side, I'm going to put that to the side, and I'm going to talk about something that's got me really fired up. And I go on these rants sometimes, and I talk a lot about pipelines, and I also say all the time, too, that I don't want the show being a commercial, that the idea of the show is to give landowners information that you need to hopefully educate you and keep you informed and clue you in on things that you need to be thinking about. And what happens there, my belief is, look, I represent landowners. That's my goal. That's my business. That's how I support my family. That's the work I do. So obviously, if you're looking for an attorney, I'd love for you to give me a call, see if we can help you out. I need to be the right fit for you. You need to have somebody you're comfortable with, all of those things. But my belief is if I can give you this information, everybody's going to benefit. People who are interested in representation may call, say, hey, hopefully this guy knows what he's talking about. I have faith in this guy. Sounds like the kind of guy that I would like working for me. So I'm going to give him a call. And if you don't call me, you hear me say this often, if you don't call me about a pipeline agreement, a gas lease, any of these items, estate planning, call somebody that knows what they're doing. Super important. But I'm going to break that a little bit. And don't get nervous. I'm not going to turn into some ambulance chasing attorney. That's never how I'll be. But what I want to do is say, listen, if you, and here's my script break here, if you are approached for a pipeline right-of-way agreement, now, could go wider than that, other agreements as well, but I'm going to say this, I'm going to limit this today. If you receive a pipeline right-of-way agreement, landman comes, knocks on the door, gives you a pipeline right-of-way agreement, here's what you do. You write down right now my number, 570-307-0702. Doug Clark, 570-307-0702. And when that landman leaves your house, call me. Call my office. Let's have a discussion. Let's figure out what's going on and learn what you can do. Because the reason why I'm saying this and breaking script is, and saying that, call me, people are signing terrible pipeline right-of-way agreements. Every single day, people are being taken advantage of. Every single day, landowners are being taken advantage of in signing pipeline right-of-way agreements that could be negotiated to receive not only, in many cases, much higher compensation or higher compensation. Okay, that's a part of it, no doubt in the world. But also, property protections, limitations. What happens here is, when you're approached for a pipeline right-of-way agreement, this landman is trying to sell you and get you to sign this agreement. So when they say to you, at times, and not all the time, if they say to you, well, we have the right to do this under your oil and gas lease. Again, call me. Let's get to the bottom of that, because maybe they have some rights under your oil and gas lease, but not all the rights that they're representing. And at the same time, are they really always this nice? Think back of the history. Think back of what your experience is. Oh, we have the right to do this, but we just want to give you this money. Well, I'm going to tell you, as a person who's done hundreds of pipeline right-of-way agreements with, I believe at this time I can say I've negotiated with 50 or more, and actually I think over 50 different companies. Okay, think about that. That's the experience. I don't say that, but to give you perspective of the voice that you're listening to, that you need to understand what is being presented and what your rights are, because that gentleman or lady at your door who's presenting this agreement to you is not informing you of what you need to know. And if you take that agreement, you say, okay, well, I kind of feel boxed in or cornered into signing this, so I'm going to go ahead and sign it. I'm going to tell you, you're making a mistake. You are making a mistake. And if you get this agreement and you just take it down to your local attorney, who's represented you in items like a real estate closing and say, hey, will you look at this? As he or her looks at this and reads this, if they do not understand all the intricacies of these agreements, and even more importantly, it's one thing to simply read the document and say, okay, I understand these words. I can read. I understand the words that are on this paper. And yeah, okay, everything makes sense to me. But if you do not understand your options, your ability to negotiate, what the market is, maybe your ability to limit the number of lines, to change location, to, if you're going to limit the number of lines, when can these lines be put in, set time frames, so many. I mean, I could go on and on. I could do shows on just those things alone. What do you expect in the future? What about the option? What type of flexibility is there going to occur in the future? What about future compensation? All of these different things. And this is just touching on, and this isn't the biggest part of what I want to talk about, but my point is this. You need to understand what your rights are. And when a company guy says to you, a landman or a lady says, hey, we have the right to do this under your oil and gas lease, you need to check that statement. And even if they do have that right, well, then there's still things that we can do. And a good attorney is going to explain where you have strengths in your leverage and negotiation process, where you have weaknesses in this process, and also discuss if you have the ability to say no, do you even want to do this? So therefore, the idea too, a good attorney, in my opinion, a good attorney is going to do the work that they need to do for you. They're going to do it efficiently. They're going to set forth right at the beginning, okay, how do we want to handle this? Let's have a game plan together. And if you don't like this and you don't have to agree to this, let's get out of this. Let's find out if an agreement can be reached quickly, such as you hear me say all the time. Let's establish, can you reach an agreement on how much money you're going to get and where this is going to be located and how many lines are going to be installed. Let's address those issues first. If we can't come to an agreement on those terms, then let's get out, and you're talking about a very little amount of time and money involved. But if you can reach an agreement there, then you go deeper, and then you strengthen these other terms. So if you're approached, again, for a pipeline right-of-way agreement at any time, anywhere across the state of Pennsylvania, across the state, I have clients in Greene County, all the way along the western part of the state, across the northern part of the state, and the northeastern Pennsylvania, and even the southern part of the state, as these interstate lines that have this FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission approval and eminent domain, that type of thing. Again, I'm breaking my general stance. I'm going to tell you, call me. Call me 570-307-0702. Call me. You need to understand that what they're telling you may be true. It may not be true at all. It may be partially true. But under any of those circumstances, whether what they tell you is true, partially true, or just simply not true, there are always things that you can do to make this process better. So there's never a time where you do not have a choice. There's never a time where you do not have a choice. You always have a choice. If you're in a situation, when I say you always have a choice, when a company comes in and says, hey, we're going to have this, we're going to get eminent domain, we're going to condemn this property, and we're going to do this. Well, ultimately, that may occur. And in most cases, that's what you're going to see occur if you don't reach an agreement. However, you have a choice in how to proceed and how to take this circumstance, which in most cases you're never going to like, but to make the best out of those circumstances. So just because it's something that ultimately, if you don't reach an agreement, here's the result, it's going to happen, well, we can still do a lot of things to try to lessen that blow, or to try to make sure, what's the plan to make sure if this is going to occur, how do we lessen the blow, and how do we at least get the most compensation for you and the best agreement for you. I am Attorney Doug Clark. Again, breaking my general rule here, pipeline right-of-way agreement, if you're approached, call me 570-307-0702. Find out what we can do, get a plan together. You need to have somebody working for you, because that guy or lady at the door is working for them. working for them. Never forget that. I am attorney Doug Clark, Clark Law Firm. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm going to be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. If you miss any of today's show or any of the prior shows dating back to August of 2010, go check out pagasleaseattorney.com. My website is pagasleaseattorney.com. Also, pipelineattorney.com. Just renovated, all new pagasleaseattorney.com website. If you haven't seen it, honestly, go check it out. Getting tons of compliments, very informative. If you need representation or not, or want to learn some things, go to pagasleaseattorney.com. Also, pipelineattorney.com, my sister site dedicated to pipelines and pipeline representation and pipeline issues. Again, the websites are not designed to just be some big commercial, but to give you information. And go to pipelineattorney.com. I'm in the process of revamping that site, working on it every chance I can get, but also balancing the time and the representation of the clients that we're working on. So remember, I'm also doing the show now. We're putting it up on YouTube, so you can go to YouTube, type in All Things Marcellus. I'm not even sure. You may be able to type in my name, and you can get this week's show. We put them up on Monday mornings, and other shows are up there as well, so we started doing that recently. You want to make sure that you're getting fresh, new information, that you're not looking or listening to shows or reading information online from 2009, 10, 8, 7, or even 11, 12, 13, or even 14. We want to make sure that you're getting the most current, relevant information that's available at the present time. I've been talking about pipeline representation, and between the segments, I realized I think I got even more fired up during the break there. It's driving me crazy. It truly is driving me crazy because I get calls every week and usually have new pipeline clients every week. I don't know if there's anyone out there who's representing or has represented as many landowners in the last 5+ years and even longer in pipeline agreements. I say this to offer perspective of, okay, is this a guy who's had 3 clients, 3 landowners, and he's out there ranting and raving? No. I've represented hundreds of landowners in pipeline right-of-way agreements. Hundreds of landowners. Negotiations with about 50 different companies across Pennsylvania. So I see what companies I think do a really good job. I know what some companies will agree to. I see how some companies and how some landmen bully the landowner. I see how some companies will really quickly flex their muscles and use their lease agreement and kind of hit the landowner over the head with it and say, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. But even if they can, there are still things that you can do. And you'll hear me say this time and time again, and it's hard to explain in the radio show, but there are worse things than to have a pipeline right-of-way installed on your property under the terms of your oil and gas lease. I'm going to say that again. Now, you got to take your every individual situation, but there are worse things that can occur, and I'll put it this way, it may not even be a bad thing necessarily that a gas company or the pipeline company installs the pipeline under the terms of the gas lease, meaning you didn't reach an agreement for a pipeline right-of-way, a separate contract. Instead, he said, okay, company, if you have the authority to put this in under my gas lease, go to it. But you have to abide by the terms of my gas lease. But go ahead, do it. And these companies are bullying the heck out of people and making everyone so afraid. And what they'll do, too, they'll say, well, we'll give you this amount of money if you sign a right-of-way agreement, but we'll give you almost nothing if we go under the terms of the gas lease. And that's where you need to have somebody working for you and explaining these issues so you can make an informed, intelligent decision as to what's the best way to proceed. I had this great case, and I had this client who they came to me, and we were in this process and they didn't like these locations. There was a lot of things going on with these pipeline negotiations, and it got to the point then, and when I say a lot of things going on, when you're doing this maneuvering and positioning, typically this isn't a whole bunch of time as far as legal expense and costing the landowner a lot of money, because you're not into these detailed negotiations. If your lawyer is doing a good job, he or she isn't going into those negotiations in detail until you're confident that you're going to reach an agreement. Because, in my opinion, you're not being a good lawyer. And for me, you're not going to be getting more clients, but most importantly at all, it's not right. You don't want to be fooling around with detailed terms and then all of a sudden say, oh yeah, we can't reach an agreement on the amount of money, or you don't like the location. You need to have an understanding, and this comes with experience as well. You need to have an understanding of, okay, before we start having the landowner client accumulate some more expense to get this thing done, because what takes the most time is the written documents themselves. Negotiating money, how hard is that? Okay, landowner says, I want $100,000. Company says, we'll give you $25,000. Well, landowner, if you want $100,000, you know what you say? No, I want $100,000. Well, how long did that take? About 4 seconds. So company says no, you say no. $100,000, no need to discuss this anymore. $100,000, and then let's talk. Now, as I stress all the time, every situation is potentially unique. This is just a way to be looking at this where you need to understand, okay, what are my rights? What are my choices? So what happened, okay, back to this case. What happened was, well, the company then says, okay, we couldn't get an agreement on location, which again, remember, is a beginning part. So we're not spending hours and hours and hours on this. We're saying, no, we don't want this location. We want it here. Okay, we don't want it here. They say, well, how about over here? And then, so there's no agreement reached on location. So finally, the company says, okay, we're going to enter into what I call this bully phase. And they send the certified letter. We're coming in, we're going to use the gas lease. We're going to use the gas lease. And that's designed, and it may occur, and that's why I stress too, you need to have assistance when you're doing this, because this isn't something that you should be doing for the first time, and this isn't meant as specific advice for any single individual, but there are things that you can do. So in a lot of cases, so the company says, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And how do they present it? They say, well, if you sign, we're going to give you a much higher amount of money, and it depends on how long the pipeline is, a lot of variables there. But if you don't, you're going to get next to nothing. And so it said, okay, well, you know what, company? In this case, and a lot of landowners, and I stress again, you got to look at every case individually. But a lot of times people get nervous. They think, this is a really bad situation. Well, what you need then there is you need good legal advice by somebody who is experienced that can assist you and guide you for you to make the right decision. Now, maybe you may want to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take this because I think this is the better option. The point is, you can't just assume that it's the better option. So in this particular case, this client says, you know what? Ultimately, we talked about everything, discussed the pros and cons, what can occur this way, what can occur that way. And also, here's a little secret. In these cases, in most leases, we got to look at your lease, but most leases, if you put the pipeline right away in under the lease, well, if that lease terminates, so if your right to lay the line was because you owned or you were assigned rights or given rights by the gas company that held the lease to put the pipeline there. So let me make sure I explain this clearly. Remember this, but you got to look at your lease. But in most leases, the company who's going to lay the pipeline, if they're going to do it under the lease terms, that could be the company that owns your gas lease, or what happens is the company that owns your gas lease, they assign or give the right to lay pipelines under the gas lease to a pipeline company. That's called an assignment. So they'll assign the pipeline rights to a pipeline company. That pipeline company then may install, and all this has to be looked at and checked, but may install the pipeline under the terms of the gas lease. Well, in most gas leases, what do you think happens if the gas lease terminates? meaning once there's no more gas being produced or capable of being produced from your leased premises, that gas lease would then terminate in most cases, almost all cases. Well, when the gas lease terminates, what about that pipeline that's sitting in the ground under the authority of the gas lease? Well, in the vast majority of cases, you're going to have to get that pipeline out of there because you no longer have permission to have that pipeline there, because the only thing that allowed the pipeline to be in place was the fact that there was a gas lease and it was installed under the provisions of the gas lease that allowed pipelines. So when you take away that gas lease, there's a really good chance that that pipeline can't be there. Companies aren't telling people that. So you have some leverage there that maybe you don't know about. So you may be in a position where you say, you know what? I'm going to get royalties. I don't like what's going on here. I don't like where this is going to be. I don't like the way that this whole process is going. And you know what? You want to put it in under the gas lease, and sometimes there's not a big difference in compensation. You got to look at all of these factors. But if you're going to put it in under the gas lease, all right, number one, you better follow every single term of that gas lease. And some of those gas leases have restrictive terms on pipelines. So you got to look at your gas lease, part of the process. But remember, look too, in most gas leases, as soon as my lease is over, that pipeline is gone. So remember that. And I'll tell you, pipeline companies generally, they don't like that. They don't want to be in that position. But what are they going to tell you? Well, if you don't agree, we'll put it in under the gas lease. Again, every case we got to look at in detail. But I'm going to stress it again. Sometimes you want to say, go ahead and use my gas lease. That's okay. Go ahead. And yeah, maybe I may lose 10, 20,000, 30,000 now, or at least that's one way that you want me to look at it. I'm going to get royalties now. I'm going to get these other benefits, but I'll tell you what, company, you are going to follow my gas lease. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And if you're a regular listener, you know I try not to make this a commercial, but I'm telling you, because it's killing me. It's something I'm seeing way too much. People are being misled. They don't understand. They're not being informed. If you receive a pipeline right-of-way agreement offer from a gas company, from a pipeline company, if you're notified about a FERC line, there are many of these new big interstate transmission lines. I have many clients on this now. You need to give me a call. Well, if it's not me, call somebody who knows what they're doing. Because I represent clients who now say, you know what, I maybe need to get somebody with some more experience. They bring me in other documents that they've signed, and I look at them, and privately, when I look at them, I kind of shake my head because I look and I see the dates they were signed. I see the companies that were involved or the company that was involved, and I see the terms that they have, and I know they could have done a lot better. So I say, okay, well, hey, did you do this on your own? Well, no, we had another attorney. He read it. Everything looked good. Well, that's not what you do. You need to understand where you have the ability to negotiate or not negotiate. And I'm going to say this again. I'm going to keep saying this. Do not just listen to this company say, well, this is what we pay. This is all we pay. This is what we pay. We're not paying anymore. This is what we pay your neighbors. This is what we pay. That, to me, is garbage, okay? Of course, they're going to want to say that because that's going to be Atlanta's going to say, oh, well, okay, if that's all they're going to pay, then what am I going to do? I can't make it any better. Well, it's just not always true. And in most cases, I just had a company just in the last couple weeks preaching that. And you know what? They ended up paying the landowner client a heck of a lot more than what they said that they never pay any higher than. And this is just the beginning because they got a whole bunch more pipelines to put in the ground. So when you're told that, understand it's in almost all cases, never going to be true. Never going to be true. and look back and remember when you signed a lease. Well, we're not going to pay anymore. This is so high. This is so high. We're not going to pay anymore. And look what happened there. Look at these other companies that came in, pipeline companies, and said the same thing. This is all we pay. This is the highest we pay. We're never going to pay anymore. Well, you know what? They all ended up paying more. Think about that. Now, at the same time, you need to understand that just saying, okay, well, you're offering me $30 a foot. I want 100, and they say no. Well, that may be where this whole thing ends. But you need to understand what your ability is and what your leverage is to negotiate. And if you don't have a lot of leverage and there's weaknesses, then we need to discuss that, and we need to discuss, okay, how do we make the best of this? I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. You can go to pagasleaseattorney.com. That's pagasleaseattorney.com. Check out today's shows, some prior shows, a lot of gas information. Go to pipelineattorney.com, pipeline information there. I am Attorney Doug Clark. I'm going to be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. Again, you can always contact me directly. And breaking my kind of rule about making this so commercial, but if you have a pipeline right-of-way agreement that you're presented with or have been presented with that you haven't signed, call me, 570-307-0702. Same thing if you're in an area where you get one of these FERC line proposals, these interstate transmission lines, and you're approached and they say, hey, we're going to put this big line across your property. They bring up the fact that ultimately they're probably going to have eminent domain and they can condemn the property if you don't agree. Again, call me, 570-307-0702. I don't want to sound like some ambulance chasing lawyer, but I want you to understand your rights. These cases and what's happening is landowners are not thinking that they have any ability in regular cases in non-FERC lines. They're thinking that, okay, well, the company has rights under the gas lease. They're also thinking, well, pipelines is how you get royalties. And yes, that is true. And that's going to be the number one thing that the landman preaches. They're going to want to just talk to you about money, 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 money. If you do this, you're going to get a lot of money in the future. So here's the paper, sign it. Well, let me tell you, Pennsylvania's full of people who fell for that, who took that and said, oh, okay, oh, wow, that's great. That sounds good. Yeah, how do you get gas without pipelines? Well, where do I sign? Where do I sign? Pennsylvania's, there's a lot of people. There's tons of them, hundreds of them out there, and maybe thousands, but at least hundreds who say, boy, I wish I didn't just do that. I wish I didn't just do that. If you are approached, well, not I wish I didn't, they find out later on, boy, I wish I didn't do that. Because just think about the gas leasing, all the people who signed early on and were told these different things and how you're going to get all this money. And now we're sitting out there and still haven't seen royalties. You can't be taken advantage of. We can't let landowners be taken advantage of anymore. And if you don't like it, look, if you want to sign, you can go ahead and sign. Sometimes what I'll do is, have a consultation with somebody, and sometimes I'll meet with a client, meet with the landowner and say, look, why do you want to do this? Do you really want to do this? And sometimes that answer is no, and say, look, in this particular case, you can absolutely refuse. Or what you can do is you can refuse or say, well, I don't want to do this, but I would do it if the company would offer me a certain amount of money. There's a lot of things you can do, but you need to understand in your circumstance. The biggest thing, if you take one thing from today's show, one thing, take the fact that the guy, the landman, or the lady, the landman, is working for the company and trying to get you to sign that agreement. They are working for the company. You need to understand, actually, not what they tell you, not what the other side tells you. Make no mistake, these are adversarial negotiations. Now, at the end, you may have the same result, but in this process of negotiation, you want to do the best you can for yourself. So think about this. yes, you need to get pipelines need to get gas to market. Absolutely. Nobody can dispute that. You need pipelines to get the gas to market. But why should you sign at $15 and somebody else down the road or somewhere else sign at $50 a foot or more? You need to understand what your rights are. What ability you have to decline what is being presented. What abilities do you have to negotiate? And maybe if you just asked, you could limit it to one pipeline. So if the company wants to come back in the future, well, they'd have to pay you again or negotiate again. Or you could say no. One of the things that I deal with today, because of all the different pipeline and gas related work that we do, one of the things that happens now is we'll have clients call, and it may be the children of the people who originally signed a pipeline right-of-way agreement many years ago. Sometimes grandchildren, sometimes other people who bought the property. But what happens is they get a knock on the door, and the company says, hey, we want to put another pipeline, or we're going to put another pipeline in this pipeline right-of-way easement that we have on your property, because we have a pipeline right-of-way agreement that was signed in 1950, 1960, and sometimes even sooner. Well, those people are very disappointed generally, and they'll call and say, hey, can we do something here? We don't want another pipeline. Can we say no? Can we negotiate? Well, a lot of times you cannot. However, in many other times, there are things you can do, because sometimes in the original agreement, maybe there was a stipulation that the pipeline could only be so wide and had a limit on maximum width of the pipeline, and the company wants to go wider. So maybe it's a situation where the company does have the ability to put another line in, but in this document they're giving you and say, oh yeah, we have the ability under the first agreement, maybe it makes the pipeline right away wider, and you could actually refuse that or negotiate a higher price. And I see that in cases. We need to study to see, do you have an option? When I say study to see, this doesn't take a day. I mean, maybe it takes an hour. Maybe it takes less than an hour. In some cases, rarely, maybe it takes a little more, but that's rare. So we need to look and see. So what do we see? We're always learning. We're always learning. So what do we see? We say, okay, well, geez, these agreements had problems that are coming back to haunt the current landowner. So we're going to defend against those in all future agreements. And most of the times we already are, but occasionally something comes up new where a company wants to do something, and we say, okay, well, geez, had this contract been written a little bit differently, we could have prevented this issue for this landowner. And we're working on that, and we're always making these the best possible agreements as we go forward. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. Also, you miss any of today's show, go check out PAGasleaseattorney.com. That's PAGasleaseattorney.com. Radio shows are posted up there. We'll have it up tomorrow morning, Monday morning. Check it out. Also on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at Doug Clark Law. You know, all the Facebook stuff. Check out the websites. Go check out all that information. Now, I want to keep talking because, like I said, I got fired up and had my coffees this morning, and this past week I've had a lot of pipeline calls in a lot of different counties, and I'm seeing people, and I know, and it's what kills me is I know that a lot of people, they're afraid to call an attorney, and I understand that. And that's part of, hopefully if you listen to the show, you'll see that maybe I'm not like most attorneys. I don't think I am, but that's up to you to decide. So what you want to do is you want to decide, okay, should I be getting some assistance? And I'm telling you with all the honesty that I can present to you that you should be getting some assistance, whether it's me or somebody else, because too many times, routinely, landowners do not understand what rights they have, and that gas company landman, that pipeline landman, they're not telling you. Why would they? They're just saying, oh, we can do this, we can do that. In some cases, they can. In some cases, when the landowner comes to me and they say, hey, I was approached for this well pad, the guys say they can do it, what can I do? In some cases, that conversation is, unfortunately, we're limited here. You're very limited. So what do? Here's what we can do for you. Let's make the best of this. Or, hey, look, there's not what's being presented. There's really not a lot we can do with this, but there's a few things, so let's make sure that we're covering those bases. Maybe they're asking you to sign a damage release, and that damage release is too broad, and maybe we just need to change a few words so you don't run into problems in the future. So if you're limited in what you can do, well, then there's not a lot of time that can be spent. So don't be afraid to call a good lawyer who's going to help you and say, okay, hey, here's what your rights are. Here's where you're limited. Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do. So you know what? You're not going to get some enormous legal bill because there wasn't much we can do. On the flip side, oh, wait a second. You can say no. You can say, okay, well, you know what, company? Go ahead under my gas lease, but follow my gas lease. You can negotiate compensation, and there's an art to the negotiation process. So there, maybe you're going to have some more time spent on your case, but you're going to see a result that's going to more than justify that time. The result in hopefully multiple things or multiple ways and items result in increase in compensation, which people always say, well, they don't always say, but I often hear, well, it's not about the money. I say, okay, that's fine. And I totally respect that. But if you have an agreement where it's an identical document, and the company says, well, we'll give you $200,000 if you sign this agreement, or the company says, we'll give you $100,000 if you sign this agreement, which one are you going to sign? So if you have the ability to get more money with an agreement that you're happy with, who would not take more money? So the gas and pipeline companies, despite how they want to cry poor, have plenty of money. And if you're entitled, or if you're able, or the market says that you can get this better deal, get the better deal. Then work on those limitations on the terms and make sure that when you sign the strongest possible agreement. Because I talked about the gas lease, and the company says, okay, well, we have the rights. Well, why do they have those rights? Because when the gas lease was entered into, nobody negotiated it. Nobody thought about, how can I limit this future activity? How can I prevent a problem when the guy knocks on my door and says, we want to put a well pad here, or we want to put a pipeline here, or a pond here, a roadway here? How do I prevent that? Well, you can't prevent it sometimes now. That prevention needed to occur before. And it's the same thing with pipelines. In pipelines now, in most cases, almost all cases, even if they're ones that are allowed under the actual gas lease, those documents change significantly from what's being offered to the landowner. If you were listening earlier, remember, even if it is entitled, or if a company is allowed to do something under the gas lease, number one, we must check that, because that is one of the areas where landowners are very often significantly misled. But even if it is allowed under the gas lease, well, then the second question is, what are the terms of my gas lease? How does my gas lease limit this activity? Where is it landowner friendly? But then, what if my gas lease terminates in 30 years? And you want this pipeline for 100 years or more. Well, do you still have the right to have that pipeline there? So in fact, maybe I have a lot more leverage than what you're saying to me. And maybe that leverage is, I say to you, fine, go ahead under the gas lease. But when you do it and my lease is over, that pipeline comes out. Or maybe they avoid your property because they don't want to put themselves in that position. These companies don't want you to know these things. Why would the landman tell you these things? Well, okay, landowner, tell me, somebody call me tomorrow if this ever happens to you. 570-307-0702. Call me tomorrow if you've ever experienced this. Okay, here's my little role play. Landman comes to the door. Hey, landowner, we want to put a pipeline on your property. You say, oh, geez, I really don't want a pipeline on my property. Do I have to have a pipeline on my property? The landman says, well, I understand you may not want it, but because of your gas lease, we have the right to put this pipeline on your property. And you say, oh, boy, well, isn't there anything at all that I can do? What if I say no? Well, we'll put it underneath. The landman says, we'll put it on your property under the terms of the gas lease. And you say, geez, so I guess I have to sign the pipeline right-of-way agreement because that's the only way I'm going to get any more money, even though I really don't want this pipeline on my property. Now, does the landman ever say this? Well, landowner, let me tell you this. The company, yeah, we may have the right to put a pipeline on the property under the gas lease, but you know what? Your gas lease actually may terminate because it will terminate when gas is no longer being produced or capable of being produced. So it's going to terminate then. And once it terminates, we won't have the right to put this pipeline or to keep the pipeline on your property under your lease. So we have the right to do it now, but if your lease ever terminates or expires, we would have to remove that pipeline because we wouldn't have the right. So because of that, landowner, you can actually negotiate some things. Maybe you can get some higher compensation. Maybe you can just refuse, and maybe the company, we just won't do it because we want to keep it there for maybe 100 or more years. So, actually, if you really don't want it there, what you should do is maybe say, hey, look, I don't want it, and kind of push us. Maybe you should try to negotiate a higher price, get some better terms, have some limitations. You should probably do those things. Has that conversation ever taken place? If it has, call me, 570-307-0702, and you can tell me the landman's name, and we'll probably get him fired the next day. Not that we're going to do that, but I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. We need to make sure that everybody is signing a fair and best possible agreement for your specific situation. Every case is specific. You have to understand your specific situation, and it takes some understanding, experience, and knowledge about the leases, the agreements, and how companies operate in order to fully understand your situation. And generally, your neighbor doesn't know that. I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. You can go to pagasleaseattorney.com, pagasleaseattorney.com. You can, if you have a pipeline right-of-way agreement, a FERC line, any pipeline right-of-ways, anything, you can always contact me, 570-307-0702. My representation is limited to solely landowner and oil and gas right owner representation. I am here to do everything that I can to assist and help and represent Pennsylvania landowners. With that said, I'm going to tell a couple things here. And boy, I could just keep going and going on this. But hopefully it's come across. If you have a pipeline right-of-way agreement, you can call me anytime or call another attorney who knows what they're doing, who can assist you. You need to understand your lease. You need to understand what is being requested. You need to understand your leverage. What can you do? What can't you do? You need to have realistic expectations, but you need to make sure that you're doing the best you can, because this is something that's going to impact you, your children, future generations. And if you don't have children, the value of your property, if you're going to sell, all of these things need to be considered, and you need to have somebody who's working for you to educate you and understands these things, because the gas company landman, the pipeline company landman is working for the company. And as we see, as things slow down, as landmen get laid off or transferred, or sometimes just flat out let go, who gets laid off first? Who gets terminated first? The person who has the least production. So if you were a person and you said, boy, I know my job's a bit tenuous because the price of gas, the layoffs, I need to get people to sign. So what am I going to do? I may become even more desperate in the way I present things in order to get people to sign, because I'm afraid that my job could be gone if I don't produce. So think about those things. You need, as the landowner, to have someone working for you, and it isn't just self-serving, hire me. Yeah, I'd love to help you. I love helping landowners. I love what I do. But if it's not me, make sure it's somebody who understands what they're doing, who has the experience, and who can assist you, who's going to work for you, who's going to fight for you, but who's going to educate you, who's going to explain things to you, who you're going to have who build a relationship to, who's going to assist you in anything else that may come up and you need. We started doing this in 2007. There are so many clients that I've represented in so many other matters relative to oil and gas, estate planning, other areas, because we have a relationship. And whether it's with me or somebody else, that's a great relationship for a landowner and a person to have with their attorney. And look for that. Look for that, because you're going to be way better served over time, and you're going to be comfortable, and you're going to sleep at night to know, hey, I did the best I could, and I'm comfortable with who's assisting me. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations. All right, I want to say this. I think it's my shortest last segment maybe ever. Keep going over the line. But, talking about these pipelines, here's something that occurred. I'm going to tell a quick little war story here. Sometimes what happens is a company wants to do a certain project. Now, sometimes this could be in projects like a pipeline, but sometimes it's a different type of project. It's more like a compressor station, a meter site, a cathodic protection easement. One of these things, a valve site, something that is kind of a specific project, maybe a storage agreement that a company needs one parcel. And what they'll do is they'll go to a landowner and say, hey, we want to do this, and there's whatever offer there is. And then if you try to work on compensation or you don't like that, then what they'll do is they'll start going and say, well, we'll look for alternative locations. We'll go start knocking on your neighbors' doors and other landowners in the area and try to find an alternative location. Well, that's design. And sometimes they'll go do it. And sometimes they'll do it just to, it's designed in some ways. In some ways, again, everything is general, no specific advice. But in some ways, it's designed to deter you or to prevent you from trying to negotiate a higher price or a better document or a fairer document. And I had this recently with a client, and what happened was we were in some negotiations, and these guys, they want to come to my office. They want to explain all these things. And I said, look, your compensation just isn't where it needs to be. I don't want my client accumulating any type of legal expenses for a compensation that's not going to be not where it should be. So we get into the point and I say, okay, here's our compensation request. And like I say, we want to do compensation of location quick because we don't want to keep running up I don't want to say that we don't want to have you incur legal expenses if we can't reach an agreement or if it's not going anywhere. So we got to get that out of the way first. So I say, okay. So they say, well, we think that's too high. I guess we'll have to go look for alternatives. So I talked to my client, and not everybody's in this situation, but I talked to my client. I said, look, here's what they're saying. And you know how this goes because we've done other work together. And I said, how about this? Let's do this. If you agree, and always it's the client's call. So instead of this, they're trying to pull your price down and saying, well, we'll look at other locations. And we can tell because we understand and we've looked at this that, they probably really like the location of my client where they want to have this activity. So they're trying to essentially scare them into taking some lower money because they think that the client really is going to end up saying, okay, well, I'll do this for this amount of money, and I don't want to get in these negotiations. So let's do this. You know what? How about we do this? Hey, company, here's your choice. You have until 5 o'clock tomorrow to either take our number that we presented to you or don't come back. And if you do come back, then the price is first off, the client's either going to say no or the price is going to be much, much higher. So, yeah, we're not going to fool around about this little price difference where we're at because it's not a lot of money. So you want to go look at alternatives, you go look at alternatives. But I'll tell you this, when you come back, don't come knocking, or if you do, you're on notice right now that amount of money is going to be much higher than what we're talking about now. And what do you know? Within a half an hour, okay, yeah, we'll pay that price. So you got to understand your circumstance. I'm not saying that works that way all the time, but you have to understand your circumstance. So you know what company you want to call, you want to say you're going to do this. Well, you know what, this case, we're going to call your bluff. You have until 5 tomorrow. You either meet this price or keep on walking. Good luck on your alternatives. And maybe that doesn't work. Maybe it does, but you have to understand your circumstance. So based on the experience of what was being requested and knowledge of the industry, we felt pretty comfortable making that decision. And of course, now the client's very happy. We were able to get more than enough to cover all legal fees, and we're going to get a great agreement. And those are the type of things that can be done on occasion if you know what you're doing and you get good assistance. All right, I'm up against it here. You're listening to Attorney Doug Clark, Clark Law Firm. You're All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. I'll be back next week. Have a great week, everyone.